to
label
and very a bracha. You should have a lot of atzlacha, zun, parnasa, nachas, chasidische nachas, continued chasidische nachas. Should be able to do this barachava more and more and more and more. And please God, this whole table will take to Yerushalayim with the Rebbe, with Mashiach, by the Beis Hamikdash. A lot of blessing to you, and for doing what the Rebbe wants us to do is make hakel parties.
Amen. Amen. Okay.
It's good that I read on the Shabbat this week.
Look, I'm going to have to raise my voice over here.
Yes.
Ever since the creation of the world, there's been something about gold. The sparkle of gold is just, it has such an attraction, magnetic, and it's always been a wonder. In fact, gold has always been a marshal of perfection. When you want to describe a person, he's gold, or she's gold, it's always a marshal of perfection. And the reason is because of all the metals.
Gold standard.
The golden path, right? Aristotle, the Rambam, the golden path. Right, it doesn't corrode, it doesn't rust. And it's beautiful. It
sparkles.
It sparkles with its value. It's a little rare, right. And where humanity has just been fascinated with gold. Now this parsha, gold plays a prominent role. Out of all the materials the Yidden were requested to donate for the building of the Mishkan, gold was number one. Gold was the first material. The Medrash famously says, I don't have it on the paper, the Medrash famously says, really the world wasn't fitting to have gold. The Eibishter created gold solely, and with the sole purpose, for the Mishkan, for the Beis HaMikdash. Once there's gold for there, the Eibishter threw in a little extra. People can enjoy it as well. By the way, the Rebbe once said by Fabrengen that his Zayde, the Rebbe Zayde of Meir Shlomo Yarnovsky. By the way, we're going to have lots of stories tonight. Beautiful. I don't have too much on the papers. There's lots of there's going to be lots of tidbits in between the glue that puts everything together. The Rebbe once quoted by Fabrengen that his Zayde, his mother's father, Reb Meir Shlomo Yarnovsky, was from Nikolaev, southern Ukraine, but he traveled all the way to Lubavitch in Russia to spend time by the Rebbe Marash. And there were a group of young married men who were doing the same. And when he came back to Ukraine, to Nikolaev, so he told the people around him about the wealth of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash was a wealthy person. Even before he became a Rebbe, he was a successful businessman. He was in stocks and this, that, and the other. He was quite wealthy, very wealthy. The Rebbe actually writes in the Rishimis that the Rebbe Marash won numerous lotteries. He and the Tzemach Tzedek together they won one, and then on his own, the Rebbe Marash won quite a few lotteries. And that's lotteries, yes.
Quite a few.
A number. Yeah, well, he created the luck, perhaps.
Or
maybe he used alchemy, right?
Possibly rigged it?
No.
Well, listen to the end of the story. Anyhow, the Rebbe Marash was a wealthy fellow, even while he was a Rebbe. So the Rebbe Zayder of Meir Shlomo, who was spending some time as a young married man by the Rebbe Marash, he returns home to Nikolaev, and he was telling somebody about the wealth of the Rebbe Marash. And this other guy couldn't handle it. He said, what does the Rebbe Marash need money for? Why does the tzaddik need riches? Give it to the poor. It doesn't make any sense. And Reb Meir Shlomo, the Rebbe Zayde, responded to this fellow, Petach, you fool. For wem and gold is gold and silver. For mir and fadir. For who did God create gold and silver? For me and you. God created beauty for the righteous. That's what God created it for. So it belongs in the courts of the Rebbe. The chiddush is that other people also can get their hands on it. And l'chayra, that idea is mamish sourced in the Medrash that says about this week's parsha, the world really shouldn't have had gold. But once the Eibishter put it here, for his Beis HaMikdash, for his Mishkan, then already, once it's here, people can enjoy it as well. So we begin with number one. the fascination of gold. And this is going to take us on quite an interesting journey. Lots of historical facts, legends, mystery. We begin with number one. Number one is a Gemara. A Gemara in Yuma. And the Gemara speaks about a Kohen. Yuma, this is doch your Masechta. This is your Masechta. And it speaks about when the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he had to bring in the incense into the Kodesh Kadoshim, and incense was made up of, he needed a keli, a pot, he needed hot coals, and he needed spices. So where did he get the hot coals from? He got them from the outer Mizbeach. He went to the outer Mizbeach, and he used a golden shovel to get some really hot coals, and that shovel was actually the pan with which he entered into the Kodesh Kadoshim. So says the number one, B'chol yoim hoya zahav v'yorek. The incense was brought every day of the year, twice a day. But it was brought in the Kodesh, not in the Kodesh Kadoshim, but in the golden little Mizbeach in the Kodesh. On Yom Kippur, there was also Keteris brought in the Kodesh Kadoshim. And the Gemara says, here's the difference. Every day, hoya zahav v'yorek. Every day, the golden shovel that was used to get the coals off the Mizbeach was made out of yellow gold. Actually, the Kohen used to use a silver in order not to ruin the gold. He used to use a silver shovel to get the coals and then pour them into a golden one. On Yom Kippur, we don't want it to be too many stages. What? Yorek is translated as yellow. Yellow and green are kind of two shades of a similar, yellow becomes green. Right. The primary colors are yellow, blue, red, right? So this will blue into the yellow, you make green. Right, it refers to yellow gold. You're right, it's called Yorek, but the translation, what? What can I tell you? Everyone translated as yellow gold.
When yellow gold gets a little, what is called it?
Turned green.
Okay.
Is it green that it's already...
All the translations say yellow gold. No,
because gold, when it gets a little oxidized or whatever, right?
L'chayra just means yellow gold. The reason why it says Yorek is because on Yom Kippur, it was made out of red gold. The Mishnah says every day, it was yellow, it was Zahav Yorek, which we're translating as yellow, like the people before us have translated. But on Yom Kippur, the golden shovel was made out of red gold. Fine. Amar Rav Chisda, Shiva Zahavim Hein, there's 7 types of gold. Zahav, first you have gold, then there's Zahav Toiv, good gold. Zahav Ophir, gold of Ophir. He'll explain what these things mean in just a moment. Zahav Mupaz, gold of Mupaz. Zahav Shachut, Zahav Sogur, Zahav Pavayim. He explains what these are. How do I know there's Zahav and Zahav Tov, there's regular gold and good gold? Dichsiv, as the Pasuk says in the beginning of the Torah about a certain place, Uzahav Haaretz Hahi Toiv, the gold of that place is good. What does that teach you? That there's regular gold and there's good gold. By saying that the gold there is good, that teaches you that there's 2 types of gold. Exactly.
14.
Different carats, how pure it is. Zahav Ophir means the Osim Ophir comes from Ophir. Zahav Mupaz Shedoim Lapad is similar to Paz. Paz is an old gem which some say it's pearl, some say it's still unidentified. But whatever the Paz is, might be similar to topaz, ich weiß nicht. Some translate it as pearls. Is it white pearls? I don't know. But gold similar to Paz.
Right? Number of words?
Oh, yeah, 87, yeah. Zahav Shachut, it doesn't mean Shchite, it means Shenitve Kechut. You can Tavia, so what's another word for so? What's the
thread?
Yeah, well, chut is a thread and nitve is to
Spin.
Maybe there's another word. Anyhow,
Weave.
right? You know that gold. With gold you make thin plates. You can cut into thin strands, and you can mamish. Right. It can mamish be soft like a thread if it's thin enough. Strands. Zahav sogur. What does it mean? The gold that's closed. B'shor sheniftach. When the store that sells this gold opens, kol hachanuyos discards. All the other golden stores close their doors. There's a certain gold which just puts to shame all other gold. Then you have Zohav Parvayim. What's Zohav Parvayim? Shedoime ledam haporim. It's similar to the blood of cows. It's reddish gold. Now, the Rabbi Yonason of Lunel was one of the great Rishonim in Lunel, that's in Provence, in the 1100s. He tines that the Gemara of Chist is counting gold in an ascending order from least precious to most precious. So the most precious is the reddish gold. That's similar to the blood of a cow. On Yom Kippur, that's what was used. Why? Because when you bring it into the Kodesh Kodashim, you know what else was brought into the Kodesh Kodashim? The blood of a cow. The Kohen Gadol's cow, he brought the blood in. So to connect.
Stay color coordinated.
Right, exactly, you know. So you have the reddish gold and the blood of the par. Yeah.
Kodesh Kedoshim.
What's that? The most inner chamber, where the Oren is,
Yes.
just the ark. And the Kohen Gadol would enter there
Kodesh
once a
Kedoshim
year.
Translates to
Holy of Holies. It's pretty holy.
So to stay on color theme,
Yeah.
red theme.
So Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi says, Chamisha hein. No, there's really only 5 types of gold. V'chol chad v'chad ispe zohav v'zohav tov. There's really 5. Zohav oifir, mupaz, shachut, sagar, and parvayim that we mentioned. And each one has, you know, the basic version and then the zohav tov. And Tanya nami hachi, we have a brayse. B'chol yom, every day, hayazava yorik, when the kohen would get the coals from the outer mizbeach to bring the incense, the gold was yellowish. V'hayoim, but Yom Kippur, it's Adam, it's red. V'hainu zov parvayim, and this is the ultimate gold of parvayim, which is called parvayim. Parvayim is actually the name of a place, but it's also called parvayim because parim cows. It's similar to the dam hapar. So we're saying that the ultimate gold is reddish gold. Okay. So this is a Gemara that speaks about different levels and layers of the of gold. Fine. It seems pretty innocent. We go to number 2. Number 2 is a Medrash in Shira Shirim Rabbah. And the Medrash there also lists as many types of gold. And it says Zov Mezukak. We're in number 2 now. What's clear gold? Purified gold. Dvei Rab Yanai or Dvei Rab Yudin Bereb Shimon. There were 2 yeshivas that debated it. Dvei Rab Yanai say, Shemechaskin oisa, you cut it, kazeisim, into olive-sized pieces. Umachilin oisa l'neimis, you give it to ostriches. Apparently, if you feed it to an ostrich, a small piece the size of an olive, the ostrich will send it out from the backside, but much clearer than when it came in. The heat and things inside the ostrich cleanses the gold. It will exit the ostrich purified.
Oh, the back one.
Dvei Rab Yudin, but Rab Shimon Omri, the other yeshiva says, the yeshiva of Rab Yudin, the son of Rab Shimon, Shematminin oise bezevel zayin shanim. If you put the gold in fertilizer, in manure, for 7 years, the yotzim mezukik, it goes out clean. Zahav par. Now, what's zahav parvayim? So the Medrash says machlokes. Reish Lakish Amar Odoim, it's red. Doim Ladam Apar. This is what we know already from the Gemara. Zahav Parvayim is red. Parvayim, it comes from the word par, is a cow, the blood of a cow. The Yesh Ermim, some say Sha'oisa Paris. Zahav Parvayim can actually expand. It can grow. And this is obviously connected to alchemy, as we'll see. Shebana Shloim Beis HaMikdash.
That says this. That on the walls it will grow.
Right. Does it say grow?
Yeah. This week's part?
Okay. I didn't manage to check up this one. Okay. Shebana Shloim, it brings this whole thing as well. This
7
whole piece.
types, the whole thing.
No, this thing we're going to see over here about Shloima. Beis HaMikdash tzor boy kol mini elanos. When Shloima built the Beis HaMikdash, he designed and etched many images of trees out of gold. When the trees in the field produce fruit, the golden trees in the house produce fruit. And then the fruit would fall off, the golden fruit. And then they would collect it. The Kohanim, the Kohanim, they were well off. They were busy collecting golden apples. So this is not there. Fine. So this is only found here in Shira Shirim Rabbah. Nah, they didn't keep it for themselves. They donated it to help fix the Beis HaMikdash. When the infamous King Menashe, towards the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, placed an idol in the Heichel, Yavshul Kol Oisam Ilanos, all those trees dried out. The whole miracle was over. This is what it says in Nachum, Uperach Lavanon Umlal, the flowers of the Lavanon, which refers to the Beis Hamikdash, Umlal has become weak, has withered. Avola Asid Love in the future is coming back. These trees are coming back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chayzer, God will return. Hadu Dechsiv, it says in Yeshaya, Parayach Tifrach, it will grow, V'sogel, it will rejoice, Af Gilas Faranen, rejoicing and song.
Amen. The goose that lays the golden egg.
What up? So here's the deal. A bit of background. We know generally there are 7 different types of wisdoms. There's mathematics, there's medicine, there's Chochmas HaTeva, science, physics, the same thing. There's astronomy. Astrology is not necessarily separate from astronomy. Astrology is the meaning behind the movements. Astronomy is the physical movements of the heavenly bodies. And astrology, is there any significance behind that? The Rambam famously credits no meaning to astrology. He believes it's all hocus pocus and babamaisis. And interestingly, the Ibn Ezra, who lived the same time as the Rambam, who was also a major rationalist, the Ibn Ezra is infamous, is notorious that in his commentary on Tanakh, he often does away with Gemara and Medrash to give a rationalist approach. Yet he was a major believer in astrology. He wrote books on it. So you have astronomy. Music's another one of the 7 wisdoms. Einstein famously said,
Where's Yankee?
Einstein said that if he wouldn't be a physicist, he would have become a musician. Yeah, the beauty of music. The Frierdiker Rebbe actually writes in one of his Rishimas, his diaries, that the Vilna Gaon had mastered all 7 wisdoms, and he had a particular favor towards Chachmas Hanagina of music. So,
What about music that's wisdom?
sorry?
7 kinds of wisdom.
7 kinds of wisdom. Now, what exactly
Music being one of them.
Correct. Now, then you have Chochmas HaTorah. When we speak about Torah, we usually refer to Nigla. When it comes to Torah, one of the biggest mitzvahs is to learn Torah. Even bigger than the mitzvah of learning Torah is the mitzvah of knowledge of Torah. The Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Talmud Torah describes the greatest mitzvah above learning is the knowledge of Torah. Now, what do you have to know? You have to know Tanakh, you have to know halacha, and you have to know the reasons behind the halachas. Nigla, that's the mitzvah of knowledge. And that's like the body, that's the guf of Torah. But then there's the mystery, the esoteric dimension of Torah. And this really divides into 2. What's known as Maisa Bereshis, what's known as Maisa Merkava. Maisa Merkava is the chariot that Yechezkel saw, and that's what is known as Kabbalah. The spiritual worlds, the Malachim, the Spheres, the Seder, Hishtalshalos, all the worlds the Eibishter created, and studying the Eibishter himself, Kabbalah. But then there's Maisa Bereshis. In Masechta Chagiga, the Gemara speaks about these 2 wisdoms. Maisa Merkava, studying Kabbalah, and Maisa Bereshis. Maisa Bereshis is to learn about the secret of creation, of this physical world. You're not learning about the world of Atzilus, it's about Olam HaAsiyah, but it's about the secrets behind creation, the secrets behind physics. The Ramban in his commentary in the beginning of Chumash says that the Torah doesn't write how the Eibishter created the world at all. It just gives a couple fun facts. A couple days, this day God did this day God did this. A couple fun facts, couple tidbits. But the secrets of how the Eibishter did it, the Ramban says, were only passed on to select individuals in every generation. Teacher to student, and there was, out of a whole generation, only a select few were privy. And this is known as Maisa Bereshis.
Yesh Mi'ayin?
Yeah, also it's part of that.
How the Tzir Fa'isius created the world.
L'ch'oira, that is part of Maisa Merkava. The Asar, the Maisa Bereshis is more passionate about how, the rule, what's behind physics, about what's the essence of nature. You're right, that to some degree, Maisa Bereshis leads you to Meiser Merkava. And that's how we're going to see that alchemy ultimately leads you to Kabbalah, as we're going to see. Generally speaking, what?
It's a natural thing or
It's a science. It's the essence behind the science.
Is it the
It's
the Goylem
no,
area?
it's be'etzem
Is it the
natural.
Goylem
The
area?
Rambam thought it was
Possibly.
physics, possibly.
Yeah. So there is a piece, a letter about alchemy, which is a machlokes if the Rambam wrote or not. But yeah, let's assume for now, and it's safe to assume, Maisa Bereshis is pretty much alchemy, and Maisa Merkava, with that we know is Kabbalah. Now, what exactly? So, what are the beliefs of alchemy? So, in a nutshell, it's like this: the alchemists believed that everything in life grows, not just people, not just animals, but everything, even doimim. Metals grow. And in alchemy, there were 7 general metals. There was gold, silver, copper, lead, tin, iron, and of course mercury. Mercury is very important in alchemy. And sulfur as well is a very important ingredient. Gofnis.
Is that a Yiddish concept as well?
That the metals grow. We're going to see what Yiddishkeit says about alchemy. What we're going to see. So these 7 metals, in old alchemic books, it says that these 7 metals correspond to the 7 stars. The 7 stars are in Torah called the Shiva Koich Ve'leches. Anyhow, the 7 stars that go, they are the sun, the moon, and Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And each one corresponds to one of these metals. Of course, Mercury corresponds to Mercury, 7 to 7.
What about the other planets?
The what? They're not. Just like they threw off Pluto. Pluto was thrown off. Nah.
Out?
With a name like that. What?
Can't include it into a serious conversation.
Well, Uranus is out.
Takes my dope barrel out.
Melech, yeah.
Have your pad, paper,
What up,
pen
Buck?
out.
Now,
You ready
there
for
was.
Mendel really likes Uranus. I don't know, it was your favorite planet, wasn't it?
What's the pad?
So anyhow, the alchemists believed that under the ground everything grows.
It's a great joke in 4th
Just
grade,
like if you put a seed in the ground, a tree will grow and fruits will grow. So too the metals grow. And
In the
ground, metals which are subpar and have a mum, unclean, unpurified, in the right atmosphere, become purified and can reach silver and can even reach gold. And the alchemists felt that whatever Mother Nature does underground, they could do in their laboratory. They felt in their laboratory also, if they have lead or they have one of those metals, they can do what happens underground and bring each of these metals to their shleimus, which is that they should reach gold. But how can they do that? They must have some element with which to transmutate or to transform the basic metals into gold.
Synthetic diamonds.
So that, right. Yes, that's rock, right.
No,
But the
they're
pressure,
literally
I know, they,
Diamonds.
yeah, well,
It's becoming a market. It's
right, yeah.
The balance sheet is down.
So there was a fellow named Zosimos. Zosimos lives in Egypt in 2nd century or 3rd century, in the end of the times of the Tanoim. And he was a major alchemist, and he says a number of things. He says that the Chochmah of alchemy is found by the Yidden. This is what he writes. Zosimos. He was an alchemist 2,000 years ago almost. No, he was a Goy, Egyptian Goy. He says that the truth of alchemy is found by the Yidden. And another thing he says is that what is the agent, what is the element with which you can make these base metals reach their shleimus? He calls it the philosopher's stone. Okay, so that's where the idea comes from. It's not a stone, it's not a rock. The Chidah in one place actually says it's a leaf, it's a herb, a special herb. But many alchemists believed it was a mercury, something with mercury and sulfur and some other magical ingredients. But when you have this agent, and a little bit of this agent can transform basic metals to reach their perfection of gold. And it wasn't just metals, it was everything in life. Particularly health, and everlasting life. They felt that if anybody would come in contact with this philosopher's stone, you would be healed from all ailments, and your life will be prolonged, perhaps to the point you could live forever. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra. I didn't manage to put it on the sheet, but it says that Avraham Avinu had a rock that he used to wear around his neck as a necklace, and anyone that would see it would be healed instantaneously. It's a clear Gemara. It's a clear Gemara. Okay, the Rajba, some Mefarshim say it's not literal, it's just a mashal, but if you take the Gemara literally, what in the world is the Gemara referring to? It's exactly the idea of the philosopher's stone. And we'll see more about this soon. So that's what Zosimus says. He says the truth of alchemy is by the Yidden, and he described this philosopher's stone.
Did he also talk about the elders of Zion or not?
I haven't read all of his works. Could be in some place he does.
Protocol? You're not familiar with the protocol?
No.
I'll give you the book.
It's interesting because alchemy is Egyptian.
Right, right.
It's Chem from Kemet.
Yeah. What does alchemy mean? So Chem in Egyptian apparently refers to the mud of the Nile.
Chem from Cham, who were the Egyptians were descended from Cham. Rashi
Oh,
said. So it's
that I never heard.
Yeah, Al-Chem means El is God and Chem is the...
Yes, is that somewhere?
Yeah.
I've seen many pshatim in alchemy. I haven't seen that. Very nice, beautiful. Apparently in Egyptian, Chem refers to the mud of the Nile. And what the alchemists were saying is we can do in our laboratory the same thing that the soil does. Just like the soil can bring seeds to a tree, to fruit, and also the metals to their perfection, we can do the same thing with our minerals and chemicals in the laboratory. So either way, this is the famous Zosimus. He said it's all found by the Yidden, and he speaks about this philosopher's stone. Like he said, apparently this began by the Egyptians. But what Zosimus is saying is, yeah, it started by the Egyptians, but then it landed in the hand of the Jews. So Zosimus is saying, if you want to get the secrets today, you got to go to the Yidden, to the Tanoim, to the great Tanoim. He lived late Tanoim, early Amoraim, Rav and Shmuel. It's almost like he's saying you got to go to the great Jewish rabbis, the Jewish mystics, to get to the secret. Presently, but originally Taka came from the Egyptians, originally. So Zosimus though was in Alexandria in Egypt in the 2nd century, 3rd century. The Chochmah, whatever was happened by the Yidden, we don't know exactly, but it was definitely in Egypt. A couple hundred years ago, the Muslims, Muhammad, his armies, they conquer Egypt in the 7th century, or 6th, 7th, 7th century. And when they take over Egypt, the Arabs, they completely acquire and take over the wisdom of alchemy. And it became an Arabic wisdom. And they fine-tuned it and they worked on it for many, many years.
And through Spain.
The Christians started getting their hands on it in the medieval times, in the 11th century, 12th century, but it was banned. It was officially banned by the Pope. The churches banned it because they felt, first of all, sulfur. In Christianity, they link gofris, sulfur, with the Satan, and anyone that's dabbling with sulfur will be accused of summoning the Satan and will be killed as a witch. And many alchemists were murdered by the church. They were killed because they were accused to be witches, because there was sulfur going on in their laboratories. So it was with lots of danger, but nonetheless, the Christians were learning it from the Arabs. Fine. This continues.
Zosimus was what? Greek?
Zosimus was Egyptian, in Alexandria in Egypt in the 2nd or 3rd century.
That's probably, it was Greek. It's Greek Egyptian.
Perhaps. Till we reach our next story. And the next story takes us to the end of the 1300s. And this is one of the greatest stories in alchemy. There was a fellow by the name of Nicolas Flamel. And he lived in France. He lived in Paris. I was talking to the Bochum, and they said they all know about him from Harry Potter. I said, listen, I don't know.
Really?
I wasn't able to get any of those sources of any excerpts of Harry Potter on the sheet. So, but what we do know is like this: he definitely existed. He lived in Paris, and he was a writer. He had a beautiful handwriting, and he would copy manuscripts. He made a meager living. Somehow, he and his wife became stupendously rich.
Figured it out.
Before he disappeared, it's recorded in French documents that he donated over 10 schools, orphanages, cloisters, meaning tens and tens of millions of dollars or more. And there's no one had a good explanation of how he had that money if he was just a scribe. He disappears or dies in about 1410. 200 years later, manuscripts are printed, which allegedly were his manuscripts, but they lay unpublished, and in the early 1600s they were published. And they're attributed to him. Those that printed it said they're mamish his, and in it he writes the following. What's written is like this. He got hold of an alchemist manuscript, which wasn't that long, but was an impossible read. He couldn't understand the language, let alone the pictures. It's well known that the alchemists would write their secrets in very bizarre pictures. The pictures of alchemy are famous till today, and all the scholars are trying to decipher what they mean and da-da-da, because the Chachomim, the few alchemists that knew what they were doing, they hid it in such a way no one could figure it out. You know, the Arizal in one place says that Rab Shimon Bar Yochai was not the greatest Kabbalist amongst the Tanoim. It's a clear Arizal. He says Rab Shimon Bar Yochai was not the greatest Kabbalist of the Tanoim, but he had a magical skill that no one else had. He could take the deepest inyanim of Kabbalah and camouflage them in a sentence that unless you had the right glasses, you would completely miss it. So for those that are in, they'll be able to snuff out and see the depth of everything that's in his words. But for the uninitiated, you'll see nothing. And only Rashbi had that, that was able to pull off that magic trick. That's what the Arizal says. And it's the alchemists were famous of doing this, of putting whatever secrets they had into these pictures. Nicholas Flamel spent years on this treatise. He couldn't figure it out. Until in the end of the 1300s, he decided he's going to travel. And he went from France to Spain. And he asked different Chachomim to explain. He didn't get any answers. On his way back to France, he bumped into an old Yid with a lange weiße board. And the old Yid sees the Kuntras, this little pamphlet. And he says, you know what this is? This is, look at number 7. The book of the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. What is that? So you have to know the following story. Around the same time, there was a Jew in Worms by the name of Avraham of Worms, who was a Yid. This would be the end of the Baalei Tosfos, the end of the 1300s. This guy was a big scholar, but he was thirsty for Pnimis Inyanim, for Kabbalah.
Where's Worms?
What?
Where's Worms?
Worms is in Germany. He traveled all the way from Worms to Egypt. Very far, all the way across the Mediterranean, comes to Egypt. And he writes that I was near the Nile, and there was a little hill. On top of the hill was a little hut. And in the little hut, there was an old little man. His name was Abramelin. His name probably was Ibrahim, but like the Avremel version in the Egyptian world, Abramelin. And this guy was an old sage. And he tells Avram of Worms that I can teach you the deepest secrets of magic and of apparently Kabbalah type of secrets. This Egyptian guy was a guy, but he was a big maimin in Hashem Echad. And Fakert, he told Avram of Worms, you may be a Jew, but how committed are you to God? He said, I can't teach you right now. First, he charged him an enormous amount of money. That was all the money Avram had with him. He gave him every penny. Abramelin took the money right away. He went to the nearby city. He gave every penny to the poor that lived there. He came back. He had a few discussions with Avram of Worms, and he said, you know what, I feel that you're ready. The time is ripe. And he taught him all the secrets that he knew. of the secrets of creation, alchemic secrets, yeah, whatever it was, lots of magic and things like that. And this Avraham of Worms put it into a book, and the book was translated. This is the English version of the book of the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. Lots of magic squares and different types of, whatever these things are. So going back to Nicholas Flamel, we said, had this book, didn't know what it was, couldn't figure out Pshat. And he meets this old Jew who tells him, this is the book written by Avraham of Worms. And the old Jew explains it to Nicholas of Flamel. Explains to him the whole thing. Nicholas Flamel comes back to Paris, and he gets involved in alchemy, because he knew now apparently he knew how to make the Philosopher's Stone, and allegedly he turned many base metals into gold, and that's how he had stupendous wealth, even though he was just described.
He's still alive right now. He disappeared.
You're not the only one to say that. He made his own matzeva. He designed and built it himself. Some allege that he himself planted in the cemetery to cover up his own disappearance. In the early 1400s, he disappears. In the 1800s, somebody appears in Paris. He walks around the whole city telling everyone, I'm Nicholas Flamel, and I'm ready to spill the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone. Unfortunately, no one took him seriously. They all thought he was a Meshuggah, right? And that was the end of that. But
Probably was a Meshuggah.
probably was, yeah. Anyhow, so from that point on, since the early 1600s, Nicholas Flamel became mamash a hero. Mamash a hero in alchemy. He lived 200 years before them, but the story was nisparsim in the early 1600s. Now,
You say what an alchemist was? He was a guy who
to reach the
basically
secrets
Took
of
copper
every,
and turned it into gold.
to bring every item in creation, to bring every item of creation to its perfection, to purify everything that God created. It's almost like the Medrash says the Eibishter created the world lasos. Hashem created Asher bara lekim lasos to do. The Medrash says lasakin, it means the Eibishter created and we have to fix it. The alchemists believe that everything in creation needs to be perfected. You can only perfect something if you know the essence of the item and you bring it to its perfection. The alchemists are really looking for the secret of life. There was the way it was worded by somebody was that the alchemists seemed to be looking for gold. In truth, they were looking for God. Gold or God, what is the quest of the alchemists? Superficially, it's gold, but that's just one expression of their quest. It's really looking for the truth behind nature. Now,
there's an internal alchemy for finding the spirit.
yeah, sure.
That's really the
Right.
esoteric
Well, then you have the psychiatrist as well. You have Sigmund Freud's student, Carl Jung. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. He took it exactly. Anyhow, it gets more exciting. So during the 12th century, the 13th century, the Christians, the Pope, the churches outlawed alchemy. It was forbidden. And if you were considered to be a machashef, a witch practicing magic, you would be killed. It was more the Arabs that were involved in it than the Christians, until the Renaissance movement began, particularly in Italy in the 1400s. The Renaissance, you have like what's known as the Dark Ages, the medieval times, and the Renaissance. Really what the Renaissance was it was a tnu of apicursus. It was, let's throw the yoke of religion off us. Let's make man the pinnacle, the center of creation. Let man use his mind to come up with the greatest inventions and the greatest understanding. And that's it. They kind of threw off the yoke of the church to some degree. And because of that, what?
I'm not so sure. I don't know if they threw off the yoke of, like, they
To
were
some
very
degree.
religious back then. They just threw off the yoke of, like, that, because the church, as proven, was very corrupt. So they thought religious structures.
Well, many things that the church had banned now became mutter. And alchemy was one of them. And alchemy became very big in the 1400s and the 1500s. And that's when many Yidden got involved in it. We're going to see some of the greatest Yidden of the times were big alchemists. Before then, the Yidden that were living in the Baalei Taisus that were in Christian countries, if the Christians themselves weren't allowed to do it, you're not going to find the Baalei Tosfos involved in alchemy. I'll tell you, the Rabbeinu Tam, though, had a special favor for gold. Rabbeinu Tam was a very wealthy man. He was a banker, a very rich man. In fact, during the Second Crusade in 1147, the Goyim, they came to Rabbeinu Tam, they said, "You're the wealthy Rabbeinu Tam, you're the rabbi of the Jews." They tried to kill him, they wounded his head, fire, a whole story about Rabbeinu Tam survived. Yeah. But we know that Rabbeinu Tam, if when he was learning something, it was eluding him and there was confusion, he would put a pile of gold in front of him. Yeah, Rabbeinu Tam would get a pile of gold in front of him, and it would lift up his soul and his heart, put him in a better mood. Rabbeinu Tam, the greatest of the Rishonim. Wow. You know, a brain that we can't imagine, a holy Jew, you know, the leader of the Yidden, and yet when he was downcast, the gold, you know, from his own, the safe downstairs, you know, his own gold would put him, and what? No, so obviously the word wasn't he was counting his money. It was the gold itself. It was the gold itself. And I think that's the word to the Medrash that says gold was created for the Beis HaMikdash. Gold is really a holy substance. The world really wasn't worthy for gold. It was created for the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, then Hashem made a bit extra. Makes sense, Rabbeinu Tam. When Rabbeinu Tam saw gold, he didn't see the gold that we see. He saw gold as taka, you know, something, anyhow. But the Rishonim that lived in Christian countries during the medieval times couldn't really get their hands dirty in alchemy. Those that were, that's why this Avrom of Worms had to travel to Egypt. But once the Renaissance movement began, things changed drastically. And in the 1400s, there was a Goyish fellow. I always forget his name. His first name was Pico. Pico della. Let's see if I have. Della Mirandola. Mirandola was his last name. Pico della Mirandola. He died young. What? Pico della Mirandola. He lived in Italy. He died at 30 years old. So, nevertheless, he's very famous. He was an incredible scholar, but he was a guy but he was a big alchemist. What's important is he was a student of two very important Yidden that lived at the time in Italy. One of them was Eliyahu del Medigo. You have to pardon me for all the names I'm throwing out, but there was a Yid at the time by the name of Eliyahu del Medigo. We're talking now the end of the 1400s. Pico was a guy, but this is very important. Eliyahu del Medigo lived in Padua. Del Medigo is medic, he was a doctor. He was a great philosopher. He was the first one to openly criticize the Zohar, and he wrote a book called Bechinas Hadas, where he delegitimizes both the Zohar and Kabbalah. The Tzemach Tzedek, on his table, he was caught having the Sefer Bechinas Hadas on his table. He was studying the Sefer. But the Sefer was written by a frum Jew, Eliyahu del Medigo, criticizing Kabbalah, the Zohar, but the Tzemach Tzedek had the Sefer, he learned the Sefer.
Sorry, I'm going to get out a few minutes early.
No problem. This Eliyahu del Medigo was a professor in Padua, in the great University of Padua. He criticized or critiqued against Kabbalah, but he was a teacher of this Pico della Mirandola. No, Mirandola was the guy. This guy studied under this Jewish professor, Eliyahu del Medigo. Eliyahu del Medigo taught him Hebrew. He taught him Aramaic. He taught him Arabic, and here's the clincher. He translated Kabbalistic Sfarim, although he was an antagonist against Kabbalah, this Eliyahu del Medigo. He took Kabbalistic Sfarim, in particular the Pirush Rikanti, because he's from Italy, on Chumash. He translated into Latin for this Pico to study. And this Pico was a great Talmud of Eliyahu del Medigo. Then this Pico afterwards studied under another very important Jewish sage by the name of Yochanan Alemano. Not so much is known about him. Yochanan Alemano is at the end of the 1400s. Yochanan Alemano was a major mystic a Kabbalist, and hugely into magic. Not into practicing magic, into studying magic, alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, everything that's behind what meets the eye. And this Yochanan wrote many Sfarim, some of them we have in print. And he writes a lot about alchemy. He was a believer in alchemy. And this Pico fellow studied under this Yochanan Alamano as well. So this Pico, who himself by the Goyish world was one of the big alchemists, his Rebbes were two Yidden. One of them was Eliyahu del Medigo, who gave him the in into Hebrew, into Aramaic, to Arabic, and translated into Latin for him Kabbalistic works. And then he studied more Kabbalah and magic and alchemy under this Yochanan Alamano, who was this big guy into magic. Obviously a Frum Yid and everything. But here's the clincher. This Pico felt that alchemy and Kabbalah go hand in hand. They're both discussing the secrets of creation. It's like Maisa Bereshis and Maisa Merkava lead one, and you really want to know the essence of creation, you have to know about spirituality, right? The atom is not the essence of creation. If you want to know what's behind the atom, what's behind the protons, neutrons, what's deeper than that, it's not about what's smaller. There's a whole new dimension, the dimension of spirituality.
Isn't that similar to what you were saying a few classes ago, like what Plato was saying?
You should know that this Yochanan Alamana was a big Platonist versus our...
Neoplaton.
Right, yeah, that's correct. Bechla, we mentioned that shir as well, that the Kabbalists, the Mukabalim in general, favored Plato over Aristotle.
Like the Rambam.
And we saw that Amor writes that Plato was Makabel Chochmah from Yiddish Chachamim. And anyhow, what? No, that was Aristotle. Aristotle was Megayer, according to those.
I thought
According to
Socrates was the
Seder,
one who got
No, Socrates was killed.
No, but he got it from Jewish stuff and then he taught Plato.
So, but then we saw that Plato met up with Yirmiyah.
I thought it was
The Ramah says, you want to know the words of the Ramah? The Ramah says in Torah Sa'ila like this. We have a tradition. Socrates was Makabel from Achitophel. Although they lived 400 years from each other, it means the wisdom of Achitophel somehow trickled down to Plato, to Socrates. And Plato kibel min hanavim from the prophets, he says. And we discussed the story that Plato met up with Yirmiyah in Egypt. Anyhow. And Aristotle was a different story. When Alexander the Great conquered Eretz Yisrael, he found Shlomo's library, which had many manuscripts that Shlomo wrote in addition to Mishlei, Shir Hashirim, and Koheles. And Alexander the Great gave Aristotle rights to the library. Aristotle went to the library, and anything good that he found, he plagiarized and wrote in his own name.
That's what the Rambam says, that the Aristotelian physics comes from the Jews originally.
Yeah. Right. Although there are records that the Rambam at the end of his life had charota for many of the Aristotelian beliefs that he spoke about.
Not all those were real letters, Rav Kapach says.
Okay.
But
And wasn't Sadyagan also like
these are things that were there are Mukubalim that write about this 300 years before Kapach, that the Rambam had charota from many of these beliefs.
Yeah. To help
So in other words, these are big Kabbalists, and anyhow. But either way, back to our discussion over here. It's getting late. We're not having enough time to read through the sources, but it doesn't matter. So it's all that. So what happened was this Pico della Morindara. I can't remember the last name. What this Pico made a huge studium is the Christian Kabbalists. In the end of the 1400s, throughout the 1500s, there was a major movement known as the Christian Kabbalists. And the reason they were so into Kabbalah was because since with the Renaissance, alchemy came into the light, and it became widespread that the secrets of alchemy can only be understood with the secrets of Kabbalah. And that was what this Pico pushed, because he studied both alchemy and Kabbalah under this Mordechai, under this...
New Christians allowed.
This Yochanan Alamano fellow. And this Yochanan Alamano fellow.
The new Christians allowed it.
What?
I'm saying these Christians allowed it.
Yeah, in the Renaissance, things became much more mutter. Everything permitted. Life was looser. people were into wisdom, and instead of being far-fetched, be open-minded, be a bissel breit. So the movement of the Christian Kabbalists began. And the funny thing is, it began by who? Pico first studied under Elio del Medigo, who was the first major criticizer of the Zohar and Kabbalah. But through him translating Kabbalistic texts for this Pico, his student, he did as a personal favor. Through that, he actually brought Kabbalah to the Christians. How ironic is that? He felt the Yidden shouldn't learn Kabbalah, and through him actually, you see, that's what happens, It's like Shaul was said. Shaul didn't have mercy when it came to the...
Anyone learns Aristotle, it's actually very good because they're learning Torah. It's all from Shlomo.
No, not everything. Apparently not everything. Apparently the Mekubalim say some things where he plagiarized from Shlomo, and many things he broke away from Plato and wrote on his own. Some Mekubalim say anything good you find in Aristotle is what he stole from Shlomo. The rest of it he came up on his own, and it's inaccurate. Plato. That's true. Also true. Anyhow, but let's get back to the thing. Whew.
You were just saying a story.
Yeah, too many stories.
No, you were jumping.
So this takes us into the 1500s. In the 1500s, almost every king and prince in Europe needed to have an alchemy in his court. Because if not, Gefelt, he was lacking. You don't have an alchemist. King
Wasn't
Rudolf...
it to verify that the gold was really gold? It was more about that?
No, it was about enhancing to create gold. It was to create gold. Create riches.
Then gold becomes worthless, though. If everybody's creating gold.
Not everybody. There was you do a little bit. If a guy makes...
People were killed. The Chovos
if a
HaLevavos
guy
talks about it.
Right. So we have that
if
right.
you found out that you did it because
exactly.
you're falsifying gold.
Right.
It's a negative thing.
Fraud. So
it's like counterfeit money.
Right. So in the 1500s,
They're saying it's a lab diamond.
we come to a few fellows that were majorly involved in alchemy. And one of them is Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital arrives, he learns by Reb Chaim Vital was about 27 years old when he began to learn from the Arizal. His whole learning from the Arizal was about 1.5 years, 2 years. The Arizal only spent about 2.5 years in Sfas, and the first 6 months Chaim Vital wasn't even there. He finally comes, he only spends about 2 years with the Arizal. The Arizal, when he first saw Chaim Vital, he says, Reb Chaim, I see on your forehead, I see the pasuk, V'lachshav machshavos bazov bakesef u'banchoshes. You're busy making calculations of how to manipulate gold, silver, and copper, which is a pasuk about Betzalel in relation to building the Mishkan. It says about Betzalel, who was chosen to work with all the metals, V'lachshav machshavos, he knew how to make these calculations. And many said, you know what that means? That's the secret of alchemy. That's the secret of alchemy. Reb Chaim Vital writes in his Sefer HaChazyonos, one of the very interesting works he wrote about his own life, that Aitaka had kochsich in alchemy for a couple years before I came to the Arizal. The Arizal saw me, he saw it written on my forehead, he saw the pasuk, V'lachshav machshavos bazov bakesef u'banchoshes. And Chaim Vital describes how the 7 metals don't only correspond to the 7 stars from the sun till Saturn, but also the 7 spheres. Each metal corresponds to another sphere, and that's where it gets its chayas from. And just like the spheres can be mashpia into each other, the different metals can grow and can mature and can mashpia one to another. And this is really the secret of life. You have to go into the Kabbalah.
Yeah, but the spheres can't combine, and the metals can.
Hiskalulus of spheres. Each one is made up of the other sphere.
The whole
Sphere Seimer
is about it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know, metals can combine. So
I can make an alloy. Gvura Shebechesed. Yeah, these things, they. But just like it could mashpia into another one, so too the metals, Pasha, can merge, can even transform into another.
That's what smelting is.
Why is alchemy different?
So Reb Chaim Vital was major in this, and he wrote a few sforim about alchemy. Sefer HaPa'ulos, there's no question he was big into it. And he actually seems to write in one place that he actually was succeeded in turning some of the metals into gold. He writes that.
Chaim Vital wrote that.
It's not
That's what's
Mistaber,
mashma.
because they were all poor.
Chaim Vital was poor. We don't know. He lives in many years. He lives in Syria, in Damascus. He had a yeshiva. Maybe he supported the Bachrim. Who knows how much he turned into gold? That was just another expression. He wasn't looking to make
French guy
gold.
makes sense if he did it. He had all.
Exactly.
He was.
What?
Maybe he had different
Same
motivations.
thing. It doesn't make sense. Shlomo Melech would have done it. Like
There are records that Shlomo did it. Many times. See, this is what happened when the Christians became very involved in alchemy. They turned to Tanakh and they said everything we find in Tanakh is allusions to alchemy. Look, for example, look in number 4 on the sheet over here. Number 4 is a pasuk in Parshas Vayishlach. Vayomas Baal Chonon ben Achbar. Chonon ben Achbar dies. Vayimlech Tachtav Hadar. Hadar rules underneath him. From the city of Pa'ul. The name of his wife is Mehei Tavel. Bas Matred, the daughter of Matred. Bas Mei Zohov, the daughter of Mei Zohov. The Ibn Ezra says underneath, Mei Zohov, Kach Shmoi. The Zayda's name was Mei Zohov. The Hagon Omar, Reb Sadi Gon says, Tzoyref Zohov. He used to form gold. Achedim Omru, others say it's a remez, it's a hint, La'oisim Zohov min HaChoshes, to those that make gold from copper. So the Ibn Ezra is in the 1100s, born in the 1000s, but passes away in the 1100s, is quoting. Now he starts off in Spain, in the land of the Arabs, but then he doesn't believe in it. He doesn't believe in alchemy. He doesn't believe in it. But he's saying that people in his time said that's what's in the pasuk.
What is this from? What's the source?
Vayishlach, Parshas Vayishlach at the end.
It.
Yeah, he doesn't, but he's saying that people say in his time, 1,000 years ago, people were pointing to this pasuk in Chumash. That's what he says.
But he's
Ibn
acknowledging,
Ezra.
acknowledging that it's out there. That's what he's saying.
What he's
Is that-
saying.
And Reb Chaim,
he's saying it's his
First
opinion.
of all, first of all, even if alchemy is true, it could be it's a shtus to find this funny. Who says what the pasuk means? You should know that these same people said mehei tabel comes from the word metabolism, is the same idea as transmutation, to change or something. So mehei tabel was a nickname of the woman of metabolism.
Metabolism in English?
Metabolism, yeah, that's where the word comes from. Metabol is an old word from Latin or whatever, Greek or wherever it comes from, which means to change something.
Metabolism.
Yeah, it comes from exactly. Yeah. That's for sure. So that's saying Mehei Tavel is coming from the same root. It's guesswork. Many of the Christians said, but Salel, the Lachshav Machshavas, said it's for sure talking about alchemy, or more than that.
Refining.
It says in
seven
the
types of gold. Yeah. Alchemy,
Refining.
Okay, go.
He had to make the pure gold, so he had to refine it.
That I accept, and he would pull it out into the strings. That's stuff.
Listen to this. There's a well-known debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. The beginning of
I noticed you didn't translate the last few words. I was like, you ended it off like, Leisim Zov Menacheshes. That was the end, period.
Fine. When it comes to the people that lived for 1,000 years, in the beginning of
Now you're
time,
going to say it's not Ruach.
the beginning of the time until the first 10 generations, people living 900 years. So there's a well-known debate between the Rambam and the Ramban. The Rambam holds it's only those that were mentioned in the Chumash live that long. Everyone lives 100 years or something. The Ramban says, no, why would it be only these people? Do we know that Canaan or Lemech or these people were big tzaddikim? Yeah, but not all the people mentioned were unique. Why would they have been chosen by God to live extra long lives? Says the Ramban, everyone then lived a very long life. So sometime that in the Rambam's defense, what's pshat that there was only like one lineage of father to son that lived so long, is because only they possessed the secret to the elixir of life. And that was the secret of alchemy. And it was,
Why is alchemy the same thing as the
same
from
thing.
that stone. It came from that stone.
it's all the same thing.
To everything.
It's all the same thing. The philosopher's stone was just a liquid, and it's not always the same liquid. It's the elements of nature. It's the elements of nature that help things reach their.
George Soros
They're
has
shlemus.
alchemy.
Fidel Castro had
Anyhow.
a lot of it. So we're past everybody.
You gonna turn him into a believer, or are you gonna leave him like this hanging?
Bourbon whiskey.
Ah. Well, listen. No. So there's all. Listen. How do you explain the Rambam? Hello. How do you explain the Rambam? Canaan. He lives 900 years. We don't know anything unique about him. Why him out of his whole generation? The Ramban says they weren't. They were regular people. They must have had some secret that was passed down from father to son. This is how else it's a Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. How else do you explain the Rambam? Listen, it's not my pshat. It's a bit outlandish, but this is what many believe. Those that believe in alchemy will say this is ironclad proof. Anyhow,
Iron that can turn into gold.
Gold standard.
iron was the hardest of the metals to turn into gold. You should anyhow.
What do you need to take the chayshus?
Anyhow, in the 1500s, alchemy got so big that there was a fellow known as King Rudolph who lived in Prague in the times of the Maharal. King Rudolph at one point had 200 alchemists working for him.
Bohemia. That's what it's called back then. Bohemia was the name of Prague.
Okay, right, all right, yeah, fine. The Maharal apparently, the Maharal was heavily involved in alchemy. Like
He
the
made a
Maharal was
golem.
involved. Oh, well, that was. We had a shir earlier about Kabbalah Mises.
You never made a gun.
No, the tradition by us is
Yeah, we
the
say
Frierdiker Rebbe said he saw the remains. He saw it with his own physical eyes.
We'll get into it after, I guess.
No, we can discuss it. I've seen the
We-
sources, but the Rebbe writes in a letter.
Who says that he didn't do it? Who says
Yeah,
it?
who says for sure he didn't? How could you know for
That
sure?
never
he didn't?
existed?
There is a whole
There's a whole
thing.
story.
Or
There's
it's-
a whole story.
But I'll just tell you that the Rebbe wrote in a letter that he heard from the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe saw
No, I know the
with
story.
his eyes
He
the
was-
remains
he was
of the
in
golem.
the attic, but
No. So usually the Rebbe says, I asked the Frierdiker Rebbe what he saw and he wouldn't tell me. Fine. But there is one place the Rebbe wrote. We have a copy of the Rebbe's holy words where he writes. Not in Rishimus. It was a letter. And he writes. It's Rebbe's handwriting that the Frierdiker Rebbe said at one point he saw the remains of the golem. So to us, to me, that's the final word. You know, but
That's gold.
also you should know 200
Can
years
you
ago,
say I never saw
some
it?
the Chesed Lavrom, there are big people, Yosef Shalnatanzon, who all quote that the Maharal made a golem. 150 years ago, big Gedolei Yisrael quoted it as well.
Yeah, not
So
just
it's,
specific. In other.
Yeah, Litvisher, yeah, they quote it. Was
When you get a chance, you send that letter.
yeah, it's online.
I
It's online.
heard the first way that the Rebbe asked him, and he
Yeah,
didn't
that's
answer.
what usually the Rebbe quoted, but in one place he writes. It's the Rebbe's own handwriting, so there's nothing, the buck stops there. Anyhow,
The
I know all
Tzudaka is
those
the
that
same
deny it,
visit?
I've seen it all.
The
What?
Tzudaka story? The Sefer Torah that he looked in the
Yeah, no,
old
this
shul?
is, I don't think this is related to that.
They
It's a
say
different
it was
letter.
at the same visit.
Oh,
Was it the same idea? Was it in Prague and the Alta Shul that he saw the Torah? No?
how many visits did he do?
I'm just asking.
was it the same one? I don't know if it's the same one. I don't know. Anyways, back to the ranch. So there was a fellow by the name of Paracelsus.
This is Rudolph you started saying.
Right. So there's a Rudolph. So Rudolph, in the 1580s, he has 200 alchemists working for him. We know that one night Rudolph calls in the Maharal, and they were behind closed doors for many, many hours.
Maharal was 16. It's not 15.
Maharal was born 1512, passes away 1609.
He lived
This is in the 1580s. The Maharal spent numerous hours.
Who was the Zayda?
His Zayda was also Yehuda. He's named after his rabbi.
Yeah. Did he also live that long? Yeah,
It's only
okay.
Like 100 years.
It's fine. So yeah, I guess they have longevity in the family. So everyone was wondering what are they talking about? So the historian suggests that Rudolph was heavily into alchemy. He had 200 alchemists. The Maharal was involved in all secret things, alchemy amongst them. They suggest that the Maharal and Rudolph had a long talk about alchemy behind closed doors. But that's just guessing. Chaim Vital at that time, we know for a fact, and another big fellow at the time, who was, we know for a fact, he writes about it, was one of my most famous, one of the most colorful Jewish personalities ever, the gambling rabbi, Yehuda Arya of Modena. He's in the end of the
First guy who
50s.
counted cards.
He was the rabbi of Venice during the beginning of the casino age, and he was a major addict. He was the rabbi of the city, he was the Rav of the city, the Rosh Yeshiva, and he was busy losing money every night in the casinos.
So Rav was Basileus.
No, only if you do that for Parnasa.
Yeah.
This wasn't for
He
Parnasa.
clearly wasn't.
But he actually writes in his autobiography that once it was Yeshiva Aser B'Tammuz. On a fast, he spent the whole day in the casino. The
like
rabbi
watching
of the
movies.
city. Not just
I
that.
once got a letter on my bed. Do you remember this? We used to live in Ukraine. When we would come to America, we'd stay by my parents' house. We went out one time to go to like one of these boats to gamble. I come back, there's a letter on my bed from my father. It's a whole long letter, I'm not going to go into it. Bottom line is,
So this Yehuda Arya of Medina, when he was young, at the age of 13, he put out a book. In those days, the Chachamim in Italy often put out Sfarim in a way of a dialogue. You know, the Ramchal, who wrote Mesilas Yesharim, the original Mesilas Yesharim, his major, was written as a dialogue. And the Ramchal is a little bit later. But this Yehuda Arya of Medina, that's where his family started from, the city of Medina, the area. He puts out at 13, he puts out a book. It's a dialogue between Eldad and Meidad. One of them is the straight guy, the straight shooter, doesn't do anything wrong. And the other guy is a major gambler. And they're debating between each other if gambling is really a way of life. And each one defends their position. But he ends off the book. The purpose of the book is to prove Eldad's Taina that gambling is not the way of life. But ultimately he became a major gambler. But he was a comedian. He worked in the theater that he would write plays. This is the rabbi of the city. He directed plays because the shul didn't pay him. He's a fascinating fellow. He wrote lots of Sfarim. And unbelievable. And he wrote an autobiography, which is one of the most interesting reads you'll ever find, Chaye Yehuda. And he writes about his life, the hardships of his life. He had 3 kids, 3 sons. One of them died. One of them was murdered by thugs. And the other one traveled to Brazil and was never heard of again. The one that died during an experiment of alchemy. You see, when you're playing, alchemists played with mercury and sulfur.
Right.
When you play with mercury and sulfur, you create gunpowder. And many alchemists blew themselves up in their own laboratories. So this Yehuda Arya Medina, by the way, he was very superstitious, all Pnimis in Yonim, except for Kabbalah. Chaye Yehuda, you can find it. It's incredible. When it came to Kabbalah, he was against Kabbalah. He felt Kabbalah is a goyish azach. He denied Gilgulim. He was major against Gilgulim until the following story happened. He was the rabbi. The Chidor writes the story. He was the rabbi of Venice. One night he gets a knock on his door. It's a woman, and she says, "Rabbi, come, my little baby, little 6-month-old baby, very ill." He says, "I ran to the woman's house. I looked at the baby. The baby was mamish between life and death. You know, what am I going to do? The baby was just a couple months old, never said a word in its life." He says, all of a sudden the baby opened up its mouth and said, "Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad." The baby turned over and passed away. Yehuda Arya of Medina said, he says about himself, he says, "I wasn't a believer, but when you see it, you believe it." He says, "Then I believed in Gilgulim. I realized this soul must have been on planet Earth before and must have learned how to say Shema Yisrael." It's incredible. He says, "For years I never believed, but when you see it, you believe it." But he was big in alchemy also during this time period of the Renaissance in Italy. And unfortunately, he lost his own son. So you had big chachamim during the 1500s that got involved in it because it became open in the Christian world as well. In fact, look at the other page. Look at number 8. Look at number 8 for a second. Sure. This is the Chidah. The Chidah says, "Ubichlal harafua." If you want to know, he's going through the different wisdoms, the 7 wisdoms. Bichlal harafua chachmas hateva. Physics and science can be part of medicine. I guess chemistry is kind of a mix between medicine and physics. Either way, umisham yiparit, from there will take you l'chachmas ha'alchimia hanelemes. He refers to alchemia, we're number 8, as a hidden wisdom. Chachmas ha'alchimia hanelemes, the Chidah says. It's a hidden wisdom in number 8. V'yadati ne'eman, I know for a fact, bebiru gomer, mamish a fact, Rabbeinu Chaim Vital Zal hayabaki b'chachmas haniskeres chal alchemia. He was a baki in alchemy, etc. So in the 1500s it was big. You should know that the story of the Goyim is not just discussed by Yidden, it's discussed by Goyim as well. The Goyim are also fascinated. And many Goyim say, Goyim write that Rabbi Lowy of Prague created the Goyim through alchemy. Why do they jump to that conclusion? Because Paracelsus was in medicine one of the most famous doctors that ever lived, and one of the biggest Baalei Gaiva that ever lived was Paracelsus. And Paracelsus was a doctor, an alchemist, and he announced that he was able to create life through the secrets of alchemy, and he described how he did it. He said, you take human zera, human seed, you leave it in earth for a certain amount of time, you mix it with human blood, you don't need the egg of a woman. He says, in my own test tube, in my laboratory, I was able to create a human being. And he publicized it. All of his, and this is in the early 1500s, when the Maharal was yet a young man. When he publicized it, two things happened. His enemies said, who do you think you are to play God and create people? All the other alchemists started, doing the same thing in their laboratories. No one ever saw this golem that Paracelsus made, but Paracelsus ultimately said, I destroyed it, he said, and he says the reason. He says, anything made by man can't have a soul. Only God can create a soul. Man can't give a soul, and it's immoral to create a being without a soul. And therefore I dismantled it. So the Goyim quote that and say that the Maharal's Goyim was the same thing. The Goyim couldn't speak, it had no neshama. They link the Maharal's Goyim and they blame it on alchemy, and they link it to the story of Paracelsus, which was only a short time. Paracelsus dies in 1540 roughly. The Maharal was almost 30 years old at the time. They kind of overlap. A fascinating piece of history. All right, where are we going with all this?
Sorry, number 5.
Okay. Okay, so all right. So for the time being, we'll end with. We didn't even get to Isaac Newton. We didn't get to Isaac Newton.
And what about this
We're here all
book?
night.
We mentioned this book. We mentioned the book. That was Avram
that's-
of Worms,
that's the-
Nicholas Flamel.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna finish. We're gonna reach the home straight right now. Did Yidden Bechlal believe in alchemy, or is it a Baba Maisa? So we saw the Ibn Ezra says Eila Divrei Ruach. Chaim Vital heavily involved. The Maharal's involved. Yehuda Arya of Medina is involved. I can tell you other.
Not confirmed, but believed.
It's believed. It's believed. Very much believed. Rabbi Yoina, going a little bit later, already in the time of the Enlightenment. You see, the Renaissance was almost the beginning of the Enlightenment movement, although the Enlightenment movement only happens 200, 300 years after the Renaissance. But it was one leading to the next. The Enlightenment movement very much threw off the yoke of
2,000
religion.
years from now, they'll just combine the two.
Right. So you had the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment. And now we're in the, what are we in now in America? I don't know. We're in the dawn of the modern age. We're in the dawn of Mashiach. We're in the dawn of Mashiach, right? Ikvus of the Mashiach.
AI.
That's it, the age, exactly. The age of the age of the
I think the
future.
actual term is the
Scorpion was
information
already.
age.
Scorpion was.
It's not by chance that I am
I think the actual term is
That
the
what?
information
I
age
am
of being
confused.
technical.
AI.
Yeah.
I
I
am with him.
all right, not bad, very
Not by
nice.
chance.
So you should know, in the
Right, man?
Reb Yonis and
I
Eibeshitz,
am confused.
we spoke
AI.
about Reb Yonis last week criticizing doctors, right? Reb Yonis said the doctors are, they get, for any inner ailments, I wouldn't trust them. He said with a 10-foot pole, he says. But he was a big believer in alchemy. He spoke about it in his
Yonis and
drushes. Yonis and Eibeshitz
He had those
was a
amulets?
major Kabbalist, amulist. Yonis and Eibeshitz was a huge Rav in the Rosh Hashiva. I mean, he was a genius in Nigla. But he was into everything. He was a Kabbalah. He was accused by Yaakov Emden to be a Shabsai Tzvinik because of all the amulets, because of all the Kabbalah. He was in alchemy. Funnily enough, Yaakov Emden, the big rationalist, also into alchemy, and in many of his places he writes about it. Although in one tshuva in She'ilas Yavitz of Yaakov Emden, he says, I really wonder if they ever actually made gold out of it, if they ever. But already 1,000 years ago, by the earliest of the Rishonim, there was already a big debate if alchemy has anything going for it, or it's all rubbish. It's a debate between the Chovos Halvavis in number 3 and the Kuzari in number 5. The Chovos Halvavis, Rabbeinu Bechaya, not to be confused with the famous Rabbeinu Bechaya, the Kabbalists with his commentary on Chumash. He was the Kabbalist was later. He was a student of the Rashba in the 1300s. The Chovos Halvavos is in the 11th century. His name was also Rabbeinu Bechaya, but a couple hundred years before. And he famously discusses in his Shara B'Tochen that I have over here, the 10 advantages that a Baal B'Tochen has over the alchemist. Yeah. And he discusses, and he says, if you look at number 3 for a moment, he says, number 3, on the right, Habetech, if those that trust in God, your trust will bring you to remove from your heart all the Nyonei Ha'olam, and just think about the Eibishter, and you will be so calm and relaxed, no worries. Similar to the alchemist. The alchemist also has no worries. You know why? Because if he ever needs money, he goes downstairs to his laboratory and he turns some metal into gold. V'hu hayedei lapech hakesef l'zov, silver into gold, ha'nachoshes, and the bedil and the lead into silver. Hayedei chachma u'maisa, through wisdom and through actual chemical tricks.
Not according to Rabbeinu Bechaya.
What?
Rabbeinu Bechaya says the other way around. He's always looking behind his back.
No, but he validates.
No. First he says a Baal B'Tochen has all the milas of the alchemist. And then he says, and if the Baal B'Tochen is strong in his trust, you're better than the alchemist in 10 ways. And he goes to enumerate. For Chilosim, just really says that the alchemist needs certain apparatus to do his work. If he doesn't have them, if he's missing any of those magical ingredients, forget about him. And not always really have them.
That it's real?
He goes on such an arichis. It's yeah. Everyone points to this. Yeah. He's saying it was just. He was bringing a mushel. If there was a real thing.
Where do you see it? Where do you see it? What did you see before the Malarulos? Here, there is no if.
If he didn't believe in it, he speaks about it too much. He goes page after page, discussing 10 differences between the two. If it would just be a mushel, you would see. No, but if it would, he could have written he could have written anywhere some signal that this is a mushel. The fact that he writes it as a fact, you don't buy into this stuff.
I don't buy into it either, but here it says...
Wait, hold on. In 1941, there was the famous Harvard experiment that they transmutated small amounts of metals into gold through nuclear radiation. They did it. Now you should know that many scientists tie that the original alchemists did change some metals into gold. They didn't mamish become pure gold. The color changed, and you can make them no longer corrode. The Rishonim already discussed that if you have the right fire and different elements, you can heal some of the other metals to become similar enough to gold. So that could pass as gold. So it passes, it passes as gold.
Something passes gold.
He's talking about the.
It passes as gold, though. For it looks like gold, it tastes like gold, it smells like gold. It doesn't corrode like gold.
Mysticism. This is very simple. This is you can take
correct. But the true alchemists felt this isn't mysticism.
Yeah.
It's teva ha'olam that metals grow. That was their belief.
And
it wasn't
mysticism. And the lack of mysticism, how do you live forever?
So I'll tell you, the Sepharno, who's a great doctor, writes about Pinchas. Why did Pinchas live forever? The bracha Pinchas was given was peace. Brisi Shalom. So how from that does he live forever? Become Eliyahu. So the Sepharno explains. The Sepharno says, the reason a person dies, why does the body shut down? When there's a lack of harmony between the different elements within the body. And once the signals aren't going right, and that there's a lack of harmony between the organs and the blood vessels, etc., that's what causes different parts of the body to shut down. The Sepharno writes is black and white. If someone has perfect harmony in his body, he'll live forever. It's a Beferish Sepharno. So the alchemist will say, and by this Yochanan Alamana that we mentioned, he was in touch with the Sepharno. So these were all these Chachamim all holding hands together. So if you had the philosopher's stone, which can help hold a perfect, harmonious equilibrium within the balance within the particles of the body, then you'll live and live. Now, I don't know about forever, but
that's what that
for
article
longer,
said to you,
definitely a longer life. A longer life. What?
About living forever.
A longer life. Definitely a longer life.
The
No,
idea
here
is
you
that they
don't grow
won't be
old.
fishing in
Here
there,
you don't
yeah.
grow old.
That's what that tech
When
guy's
Nicholas
trying to do.
Flamel and his wife disappeared,
Saw that.
there were sightings. Now, I wasn't there, but there's sightings. Now, people said they saw them 30, 40 years later. They hadn't aged a day. And there was some golden tinge around the skin.
That's great.
Anyhow, But the Kuzari, anyhow, let's just look at the Kuzari in number 5 and number 6. The Kuzari is Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Yehuda Halevi was one of the greatest poets that Yiddishkeit has had, and a great philosopher.
By the way,
He was
just on Uri's thing, that the Rebbe gave an example. Like Uri said, he's teaching you what you can learn from a soccer player, what you can learn from a chess player. Uri, the Chidot could be saying what you can learn, assuming assuming alchemy is true.
I understand.
There's 10 things that come along.
No,
with
no,
it.
no, no.
Why?
Oh, no, we're not
It's like
poking
the dream.
fun that why
He's
did he
saying
believe in
the
it.
dream thing is to be an alchemist.
Right.
It's like, wow, you can. So he's
Yeah.
saying you're greater than the alchemist.
You know what? In other words, like this: if alchemy is really false, then we'll learn the Chovos HaLevavos that way. But for those of us that want to believe that alchemy might be true,
it could go anyway.
if it's true,
Then
so
he's
then maybe
saying
you,
really.
maybe
I
so.
think the Chovos HaLevavos, then you can take everything in the Chovos HaLevavos and turn it on its head if you have that level of cynicism. To
Well,
the
he's
It's
trying
not
to bring out a
cynicism.
point.
He's bringing
He's
a
got
point. He's bringing a
He's got
lesson.
The Chovos
Learn
HaLevavos
from even
is
him.
all about
That's what I think.
reading it the way it says.
No, but it's
Anyhow.
not cynicism. Or he's saying he's telling you
It's the
this guy.
ultimate.
Yeah, this guy
It's like,
has a lot of dedication
black
to his
box.
craft.
Has a black
If you
box.
have Hashem, you don't
Apply
need dedication to that
approach
craft.
Everything in the Chovos HaLevavos says
I don't
about
know.
the ultimate, the Tochin, that without any
Listen,
question,
you know,
it's
people-
it's all theory. It's all
People ask me what I do.
nice stuff.
I tell them I'm an alchemist. A bacher comes to yeshiva, he's like an unpure metal. You know, he has this, and we try and purify him and turn him into gold.
Yeah.
We live with alchemy. This is the life that we have. You know, the metal into gold was just one Indian which took the imagination of Christian Europe.
Read the Kuzari.
But anyway, so let's read the Kuzari. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, we're going to finish. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, he was a student of the Rif. So you're talking the end of the 11th century in Spain.
So this is earlier.
Yeah, the Kuzari, well, the same time as Chovos, roughly the same.
Chovos
same-
HaLevavos was
the
the same time?
1000s. Yeah, Chovos might have been a little bit older. The Kuzari, it's a philosophical sefer. Why he wrote it just for 5 seconds. 200 years before this, there was the famous Khazar kingdom, which is somewhere maybe in Kazakhstan or somewhere there in Russia, where there was a kingdom, and the king.
border of the Caspian Sea.
All right, wherever it might be, and the king there brought a Christian scholar, a Muslim scholar, and a Jewish scholar, and there was a big debate, and the Jewish scholar won, and the whole kingdom converted. That is the whatever.
Only the nobles.
Okay, whatever.
There is
Anyhow,
some, by the way,
there's-
historical.
Yeah, well, that's what. Well, Yehuda Halevi definitely believed in the story because Yehuda Halevi, was 200 years after this alleged episode. This is already 1,000 years ago, and Yehuda Halevi wrote a sefer, you know,
Based on.
describing, so to speak, the conversations that took place between the king and the Chacham,
What's it?
and he called it the Kuzari after that Khazar kingdom.
They are real. There's
Yeah, we know Chistai Ibn Shaprut, who was in Cordova,
there's
sent them letters.
There's historical evidence. There a bunch of the Byzantines, you know, the Romans from like who used to rule where Istanbul is now. They married Khazar women who had Jewish names.
Jewish names.
And they sent princesses to marry Khazar. kings.
Fascinating. So the women are
there's
fascinating.
Definitely. Really
So they
Source
even
of
took off our name.
anti-Semitism also.
Okay. So
Khazar.
Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Now this is a bit of a hard read, so we're going to try and do this together.
Yeah,
He writes in two places. Number 5, Yehuda Halevi is talking what Emmanuel Shachar loves to say. Only God can tell me how He wants to be served. Right? You can't. A human being can't decide what a mitzvah is. Only the Eibusha can tell us how He wants the mitzvah to be, and that's the idea that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is discussing at length at this part of the Kuzri. And then he said, "Kvaro inu cherpes." We already saw the embarrassment. Kol mi sheishtadol bedover ma'advorim ha'ele. Anyone that tried to do these things on their own, mibali hakimia, from alchemy, or bali haruchnius, and those that try and reach out to spiritual souls and demons. Now, what he's talking about here is he's giving a mashal. We can't. He says nature. He says the Eibishter makes things happen. The scientists, as much as they try, the Eibishter can make Let's see what he says. Basois hadivorim mibaser haboker. He says these alchemists try and bring forth bees from calf meat. You ever heard such a thing? This was one of the activities of the alchemists. Vahayetushin mayain, to bring forth flies from wine. This is a little less exotic than turning lead into gold.
Oh, yeah.
And he says like this. He says the alchemists, all those that tried to play with nature, he says they were not successful. You can't, even if it's a natural way that somehow bees can come and what are those insects that can be formed from rotting flesh?
Larva.
God makes that happen because he has a perfect recipe. His point over here is you can never make God's recipe even for nature. For sure when it comes to a mitzvah, how could you know what a perfect mitzvah is? Let's just go through this quickly. I'm not a scientist, so I'm sure there are lots of questions you can ask and I won't be able to answer. But he says, I, an alchemist, may somehow be matzliach here and there. It was like a fluke. It was just from kasher matzu hamishkul yimin avlad. It's almost like if someone's with a woman, I created human life. That science was made by God, and you're just a small tool over there. The ain la'adam, but you chant. Well, it's a very hard read. I'm just going to translate. You can try and figure it out on your own. The ain la'adam, when it comes to creating a child, bo yosem anochas hazera. It's you're planting the seed, or ba'adoma. Let's say you plant a fruit. I grow fruits, a major alchemist. You're a farmer. Yeah. You're a farmer. Shehi mezumenes lekibuloi. Let's say the earth is waiting for the seed, or the woman's waiting for the seed. Ula hatzlachosei bo, and for his hatzlacha there.
Not only waiting, but appropriate.
Right. V'shir ha'arechem sheru'uya lehem hatzura ha'enushis. The perfect set of. It's almost like it's talking about taking the egg from the woman and the zera from the man and putting them in a petri dish and growing them in a laboratory. No, but he says, today we're able to, but what he's saying is shir ha'arachim, to get the perfect atmosphere, the measurements, to create a human being, and only God knows how to do that. Okay, so this maybe they've kind of figured out today. There's many other things they haven't yet. So too, the living nation of the Yidden, for them to have God dwell amongst them. He's talking about making a mishkan, and then he's talking to make a mishkan. Imagine Hashem wouldn't tell us how to make a house of God. You're going to decide how to make a mishkan. Only the Eibishter can tell you the exact coordinates, the exact measurements, which makes it a perfect keli to reach its intent. Only God. You have to hear the amounts and all the coordinates from him. And a person shouldn't become a chacham with God. Don't think you understand exactly how it works. To pasuk, in front of God there's no wisdom. He's trying to say both mitzvahs, and he's bringing the mashal from nature and gashmias. Only the Eibishter can make the perfect recipe for something to work, both beruchnias and even begashmias. And then the Chacham tells the king, now you see the best thing we can do is just follow the way our parents understood Torah, and not for us to try and come up with our new ideas. Look at number 6. He said a similar thing. This is later on in the Kuzri. The alchemist made a mistake. He says it again. And the Ruchnim, he says Hakimiya, the alchemists choshvu, they think that if you get the perfect temperature of fire, you can manipulate things. You could change things. We know that warmth, things grow in warmth. The baby grows in the uterus of the mother, right? It's very much to do with the temperature and the climate. So if you take the egg out of the mother's womb, together with the man's seed, if you put it in the right climate, the alchemist felt with the perfect heat you could do anything. You don't even need soil maybe to make things grow. You could do it. I don't know what the word atzomim means over here. Just like natural heat does this. What makes food digest in your body? It's the climate inside the body. And the food turns into blood, it turns into flesh, into bones and everything. So that's an alchemic process happening through heat. And the alchemist felt if you have the perfect heat in your laboratory, the perfect climate, you can do these things. But says the Kuzri, V'torchem, they're busy working night after night in the laboratory to find the perfect limsite, to find this type of fire. The couple times they succeeded, by happenstance, They think that they worked it all out. Really, they have no idea what they're doing, he
And
says.
they're not going to be able to replicate it.
And he said it's just like if a man's with a woman and he happens to create a baby, right? It's not about you.
You don't know how.
You really have no idea what you're doing and how it works. It's the Eibusha that's making it happen. Anyhow, the point of the Kuz is very clear. Alchemy is Baba Mises. That's his opinion.
As much as don't waste your time trying to, because you're never going to figure it out.
He says, Cherpas. In number one, he says the embarrassment of the alchemists. I was saying because they never succeeded.
Because he never succeeded, and when you did succeed, it can't be Bummeisers because he's admitting they succeeded, but he's saying they did it because it's happenstance, and you're not going to be able to replicate
He
it.
doesn't say silver
And that's a big
metals
thing in
into
science.
gold.
If you
He
can't
says other
replicate
things.
it, you can't do it.
You have no idea what you're doing. It's the Eibishter's
Nowadays, they claim
nature
a lot of
doing.
studies that are unreplicable.
They usually don't have any.
Okay. I am now
They don't
worse.
hold any water.
Can I go make gold right now?
According
Are
to
we pulling out a college?
according to Reb Chaim Vital, you most definitely could if you knew exactly what you're doing.
Isaac Newton.
The Maharal, Yehuda Arya of Modena, the Yosher Mikandaya, Rabbi Yochanan Alamanu.
I don't not believe it. I just
Don't love it.
You just don't believe it.
Wait, what's about Isaac Newton?
He died from
I just don't actively.
Isaac Newton, after years after he passed away, they found a million words that he wrote. A million words that he wrote on alchemy.
They say he wrote more alchemy than physics.
Wow.
I don't know, I saw in one place says he has 10 million words altogether, 1 million alchemy. He had a nephew called Humphrey Newton. Humphrey Newton writes that my uncle I saw many nights, he was busy in his laboratory. He says for weeks and weeks and weeks at certain times of the year, the fire would never go out. And he says, I know my uncle, I don't know what it was, but he was trying to find something that was almost beyond human reach. At one point in time, it's fascinating, he suffered, Isaac Newton suffered memory loss, some type of dementia. He, in his like a midlife crisis, he writes letters to his friends where he accuses them of things they never did, and he had insomnia and all these things, which match with mercury poisoning.
Right.
Historians say that once they found all of these things he wrote in alchemy, and his nephew witnessed him nights after night in his, sleepless, busy with his laboratory, he was going through alchemy. And because of all the mercury that he was busy with, he got mercury poisoning, which leads to forgetfulness and all these
We
things.
just had lead poisoning when we were kids.
That's how he died.
Not so bad.
Apparently,
Right.
he was an old man.
And you shut this off.
Maybe could
No, but that was only if they broke.
Shkoyach.
So they don't have them